creative city is a resilient city. We've been living now, the past years, from crisis to crisis, a constant crisis, starting from pandemia, the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis, the crisis of inflation, a lot of instability and security crisis in Europe. We've seen big changes in the human behavior after the crisis, after pandemics, but also with changes in the tourism, which have led many places, nations and cities across the world to reimagine of what they can be. It is clear that this extensive development of based on tourism, of bigger number of visitors, more and more people coming and leaving, and money might not work anymore. What has been interesting is that actually the culture creative sectors, while being significantly hit economically, were still very flexible in adapting to the new realities. Whether there are museums that started to offer an enormous amount of new ways of connecting to the programming and the collections through online workshops, podcasts, online tours, digital content, or whether we talk about libraries from creating new ways of transferring information to people that cannot visit us, or up to the point where the libraries offered storytelling workshops to children via Skype or Messenger, or where older people will actually read stories so that they wouldn't feel alone through mobile phones. So different ways to adapt to the realities. And now we have new realities. There are museums, many cultural institutions actually, who have opened themselves up for the Ukrainian refugees, offering free services and free entrance, making sure that the people that have found themselves in their new locations can be helped through cultural experience to integrate better in the society where they are, giving more opportunities for children of refugees to experience culture. It's also to actually bring together communities for the support, showing solidarity with Ukraine, for example. Another example is museums bringing together people and actually collecting materials that are needed in Ukraine, giving together humanitarian aid, or even preparing materials that can be used on a front line by the Ukrainian soldiers to protect themselves. So these are maybe small actions, but they show this kind of a resilience of the sector, that despite those problems, despite economic hardships, it's actually these organizations, the culture sector, both private and public, that can adapt in this quickly changing environment. But it is very difficult to become resilient when the storm has hit you. Actually, building for the storm, building for problems should be part of any organization, also any city's core activities. It is understanding how to manage risks, understanding how we predict problems and make sure that we have always plan B or plan C in our back pocket. I will bring you just 3 important steps that are usually considered critical in becoming more resilient. Well, the first thing is to understand that what is an organizational resilience. We often think that resilience is that when the storm comes, like an ostrich, we put our head under the sand, we wait when the storm has come by, and then we wake up and life continues as normal. Well, maybe with the storm this can happen, but in most cases, when we wake up from the crisis, the world is not same anymore. So the idea of resilience, of building resilience, is not that we can bounce back where we start when we finished, but actually how to bounce forward. How to build skills and competences and capacities within our cities or within our organizations to be better in a future that we might not know today. The crisis that many museums and cultural organizations have gone through now, of course, were unpredictable. Who could have imagined that we are hit by Corona and the world stops and everything is closed? But at the same time, if you look at the last 20 years in our region, for example, in Latvia, in Estonia, in other Baltic countries, then we actually see that this is not the first time that a big number of tourism has crumbled. Whether it was 2000 Russian crisis, there were constant disagreements between the Baltics and the Russian when the Russians were closing the borders. 2007, there were riots in Estonia, in Tallinn, which led to a collapse of Russian tourism for a number of years. So indeed, we did not predict that Corona comes or the war comes and the borders are closed. But we've seen degrees of number of tourism for many times over the past 15 to 20 years. So if you as a museum or a festival organizer build your business model exclusively on more and more tourists, more growing and growing number of foreign tourists, cruise tourists, Russian tourists, or whatever, then that's not a smart plan. That's not managing your risk well. That's not understanding how you build a business model that takes into account those uncertainties. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it is too late to start also economically, financially, and in terms of capacity building when the crisis has hit you. So the best examples of cultural institutions and organizations that managed the most effectively throughout the crisis were those that did not start to develop their digital plan or sustainability plan or innovation plan, innovating new services and products plan when the crisis hit, but actually long before that. So when that kind of an innovation push, the dealing with agility in your organization and developing knowingly your products and services was already part of your organizational culture before the crisis, then you are much better for whatever the next crisis will be. And thirdly, finally, in order to build resilience, yes, you need a strategy. Yes, you need a risk analysis. You need to be prepared, but you also need to have a necessary flexibility in both your organizational culture. So you need to be ready to move people around. Many museums saw that it was before the crisis, many people in the museums were involved in servicing visitors. And there was always this issue that there's not enough people to work with collections. Immediately with the Corona hit and the museums were closed, actually those flexible museums, they turned many of the people working with clients, actually, or visitors, actually to support digitalization of collections, which actually in a long term was critical to the core mission of museums. So just as an example, so there's a flexibility in terms of the staff, but also flexibility for your budget. So if you have the necessary flexibility in your budget, where you can test out different things and also change a certain elements, stop certain services and then bring other services in, that helps you to become a better prepared for the next crisis.